Thank you very much. So I'm a professor of artificial intelligence, and like I suspect a few people in this room, when I was a young boy, I read far too much science fiction, and that was full of robots and intelligent machines. And there's a good reason that science fiction is full of robots and intelligent machines, because that's part of our future. And every time you open a newspaper today, that future seems to be arriving very, very quickly. And so some people are starting to ask, well, where is this all going to end? Stephen Hawkins, one of the smarter people on the planet, has said that the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. Right? I'm starting with the big questions here. And he was backed up by Elon Musk, who said, if I were to guess our biggest existential threat to the existence of our man on the planet, it's probably that, artificial intelligence. So people are starting to think, well, where is this all going to end? So I want to start by actually making you feel a little more comfortable. Right? That, should you fear this idea that you find in, Nick Bostrom's book about superintelligence? Actually, I think there are things that you should be worrying about, and they're not superintelligence. The superintelligence is something that's actually much further away than most of the people writing about it think about. I actually did a survey recently of 300 experts in AI and robotics, and most of them were saying it's somewhere about 100 or so years away before we get machines to be as smart as humans. And there are things that I will tell you about shortly that I think we should be worrying about much more imminently. And one of the misconceptions that people have is that there must be this tipping point, this idea that we're going to build machines, they're going to be intelligent. And we already see very narrow focused intelligence in the machines that we can build. And at some point, those machines will be able to improve themselves. And this self-recursive improvement will be a snowball effect. And that we'll wake up and suddenly the machines will be much smarter than us, many times smarter than us, and then, well, maybe that's the game over for mankind. Well, if you ask most people working in AI who have tried to build intelligent machines, most of us are incredibly frustrated about how hard it is to build even this most stupid intelligence into a machine. And we've nothing close to building recursive self-improvement, and that we're much more concerned in many respects about stupid AI than we are about smart AI. And that we don't know how, and it's not clear that we will ever be able to build machines with enough intelligence and enough adaptability that they can just simply improve themselves. And that people have started, it's not something that you can completely discount. It's very difficult in science to say something is impossible. And we certainly will get to machines that will be smarter than us. I'm very confident that in 50 or 100 years' time, there will be machines walking around, robots walking around, that are smarter than us in most of their capabilities. In fact, if we pick narrow focus domains, if we pick playing the ancient Chinese game of Go, if we pick predicting heart attacks, that was the thing I read about in the newspaper yesterday, reading mammograms, answering Jeopardy questions, you pick a narrow focus domain, we can already build machines that are better in many respects than any human at those tasks. But nothing yet matches the breadth of ability that humans have. The fact that I could take anyone in this room, parachute them into a new situation, and you could start doing something useful in that new domain. Whereas the machines that we build are just so brittle. Drop them into a new domain and they just break. There's nothing that has the adaptability, the flexibility, the breadth of ability that humans yet have. And that's going to take us many decades, if not centuries, to get there. But there are many things that we should be worrying about today that are going to happen in the next decade, that are going to happen in the next 2 decades, and that you should be worrying about. So this one is not urgent. And I can reassure you that it has actually been there's recently in the last few years, there's been started quite an interesting academic research effort to start addressing these questions about, well, what happens when machines are super intelligent? How do we make sure that their values are aligned? And I'm pretty confident that by the time we get there, we'll have some good answers to these questions. So that's not something that should be keeping you awake at night. But there are some other things that I think that should be keeping you awake at night that I will be telling you about and that we'll be talking about, I'm sure, on the panel. the first misconception that people have is that, well, that everyone's worried about AI. Well, now I'm a professor of AI, so I like to remind people you shouldn't be worried about AI. It's autonomy, the fact that we're giving machines the ability to act in the world, make decisions, participate in the world. That autonomy is the thing that you should be worried about. And you can see that already today with autonomous cars. We're starting to see autonomous cars. You can buy yourself a Tesla today. It will drive on the roads of Australia, and it will drive down the highway autonomously. Now, it's not very smart yet, and that's the problem. And the fact that it can act, it can make possibly life or death decisions about what to do in difficult situations. That's the thing that you have to worry about. And the problem today is it's stupid. It's not very smart. It doesn't have the sensory capabilities. It doesn't have the decision-making, the ethical reasoning that we want it to have. So it's autonomy you should worry about, not AI. And then the other thing I already mentioned, which is you should fear the stupidity of the AI. Eventually, we should probably have to fear the smartness of the AI, but today we're already giving autonomy to machines that are too stupid, and we're already seeing the consequences of that. With autonomous cars, I like to remind people of the moral imperative to build autonomous cars. In the next year, 1,000 people will die on the roads of Australia in road traffic accidents. 95% of those road traffic accidents are caused by driver error. We are the weak link. The sooner we can get humans out of the equation, replace them with much more reliable computers, the safer it's going to be. We already see this in the air. Flying is already the safest form of transport. And in fact, it's one of the most automated forms of transport already. Most of the time you're in a plane, the computer is flying the plane. When it's a bumpy landing, you can turn to the person sitting next to you and say, oh, the pilot was flying the plane today then. So there is a real moral imperative to get humans out. Once we have autonomous cars, the accident rate is going to go close to zero. Sweden has an initiative, 2020 initiative, to have 0 road deaths. And you can look at the graph of the number of road deaths in Sweden. It's a straight line going down, and it will hit 0 around about 2020. They're on target to hit that 0 road deaths. They've got all the easy gains, which is by putting airbags in your cars, by redesigning the roads. And they've worked out the only way that they're going to get down to 0 is if they get rid of us unreliable humans. And that future of autonomous cars is happening very quickly. You can buy a Tesla. It can't drive all the time autonomously. It can only drive down the highway. Now, the highway is the easy point of driving. Highway is typically divided, cars all going in the same direction. There aren't typically that many roundabouts or traffic lights. Those are the difficult things. Driving around town is much more challenging. So the Tesla can't drive around the town, but it can do a pretty good job of driving down the highway today. And most of the major manufacturers have said that they will be selling autonomous cars to you and me by 2025 at the latest. And there's an arms race going on today to be the next automotive giants. It's not clear that it's going to be necessarily General Motors or Toyota or Ford. It could be Google, Tesla, or Apple who are going to be the car companies of the future. And that's a $1 trillion industry. That's quite an interesting target to be going for. But it's not without risks. And that's one of the things I want you to take away from tonight. This is a picture of Joshua Brown's car accident. Joshua Brown is now famous in history as the first person killed by his autonomous car. He was driving down the highway. Well, no, he wasn't driving down the highway. The Tesla was driving down the highway in Florida last year. He reputedly was watching a Harry Potter movie when he should have been watching the road, because you need to pay attention to what's going on. A truck turned across the path of the car, and the Tesla didn't see the truck. It didn't have the sensors to see the truck in time, and it drove straight into the truck at 70 miles an hour, instantly killing Joshua Brown, putting him in the history books as the first person killed by his autonomous car. He had too much faith in the current state of technology. And that's something that you and I should all be skeptical about. We should be very skeptical. We should be very demanding of companies like Tesla, of the way that they want to introduce this technology. The Silicon Valley way of failing fast that they want to put and test on public roads, lethal objects, autonomous cars, without much oversight at all from government regulators. I think this is actually very irresponsible. The end point is a fantastic one. The end point where we have 0 road deaths. 1,000 people dying. Each of those road traffic accidents cost the Australian economy $1 million. That's $1 billion friction on the economy every year. Not to say of all the personal heartache, the tragedies that those road traffic accidents entail, just the financial cost to our economy is immense. Tesla responded when the publicity broke about this accident by putting out their own press release. They pointed out an example where someone collapsed in their car and the Tesla drove them to the hospital. It struck me as rather strange that we are now deciding product safely by press release, and that this is not the way that we should be going about it. That public safety shouldn't be decided by press release, and that we should be more demanding, and our regulators, our governments, should be more responsible in regulating how technologies get developed and how they get fielded. If this was a drug being tested on the public, there'd be an outcry, and yet somehow technology companies like Tesla get given a free hand to do this. And that's something I think that increasingly people will wake up to say, well, wait a second, there is responsibility with all development and all benefits. You have to think also about, every technology has downsides and risks, and you have to balance those risks. There are some other things that we should be thinking about, things that are actually already starting to impact our lives today. Autonomous cars is one that's coming very quickly. Another one I want to talk about is algorithmic discrimination. The fact that we're giving machines the ability to make decisions that impact our lives, and that wittingly or unwittingly, those machines may have biases in them. There's a very good example of this. There's the Compass program in the United States. It's used in 20 of the 52 states in the United States. It's a machine learning program that's been trained on data to predict the probability that a violent criminal will reoffend. Now, you could use this program to, for example, decide how to spend limited probationary services, help keep people out of jail, help get them back on the straight and narrow. That's not how the program is being used. It's being used by judges to decide sentencing, to decide parole conditions, to decide who to keep in jail and who to lock up. Now, you're probably already feeling, well, that's a little more squeamish now. Is that perhaps the morally right thing we should be giving a program the decision to make? And now here's the sucker punch. The program has been shown to be racially biased. That it is more likely to predict that black people will reoffend than they will, and more likely to predict that white people won't reoffend when they will. And as a consequence, in 20 of the 52 states of the United States, black people are being locked up because of a bug in a program, and white people are being presumably released into society when there's a real risk, when they shouldn't be. Now, you could, if you tried harder, probably and almost certain, get the bugs out of the program, train it on proper data, eliminate the biases. And that's something, well, first of all, we have to be aware that there are biases. We have to be aware that companies like Google have sold us a lie. Algorithms are not unbiased. They're as biased as everyone else in the room. Right? And especially when they're trained on data and you're not very careful about the data sets, they can have biases that we may just not even know are there. But even if we could get rid of all those biases, even if we could train it properly, make sure that it wasn't discriminating against race, against ethnicity, or against religion, or all the other things that we now value in our society, there's a deep philosophical question. Should we be handing those sorts of decisions over to machines? Or should be those the sorts of decisions that we leave to ourselves? In our society, one of the most severe decisions we make is depriving people of their liberty. And in most countries, that decision, or certainly for the most severe crimes, we hand over to a jury of our peers, of other individuals, of other people. And I think there's something important about our humanity that we should not forget. And there are some decisions, even if we can get machines to do them better, that we shouldn't necessarily think about handing over to machines, that we'll be giving something special about ourselves, about our humanity away if we do that. Something else I want to talk about, something else that's often talked about is technological unemployment. Will AI end all jobs? Now, this is why I need some audience participation. Who has an odd birthday? Oh wait, actually I have to tell you what I mean by an odd birthday. Were you born on an odd number day of the month? I was born on the 11th of April. 11th is an odd number. Come on, I know it's half the room. Come on, yeah, half the room. But by the way, you want to have an odd birthday, right? Because you are lucky like me. You are going to be someone, if you believe the statistics, you are going to be someone who has a job 20 years' time. About half the jobs have been predicted to be automated. I reckon it's going to be the people with odd birthdays are going to be people who have jobs still. So this was a story. This is a headline from November the 13th, 2 years ago. Unfortunately, a very sad news story was breaking in Paris. At that time may have distracted your attention from it. But the chief economist of the Bank of England, now you would hope the chief economist of the Bank of England knows something about what he's talking about, went on the public record as saying that 50% of jobs in the UK are at risk of being automated by AI and robotics. That's a very severe risk, a very large number, right? And there have been a bunch of other reports that have come out, made similar sorts of large-sounding predictions. Probably the first one that came out was in September 2013. Report that came out of the University of Oxford, the Oxford Man's School, where they used, ironically enough, they used machine learning to predict the number of jobs at risk of automation. So the job of predicting the number of jobs at risk of automation has been automated already. No, few people saw the irony in this. They came up with this or the machine learning program came up with this prediction that 47% of jobs in the United States were at risk of automation in the next 2 decades. Similar numbers have come out. There's a report that was done by some colleagues of mine for Australia. Similar numbers, 45% I think it was in Australia. Other similar numbers. These are big numbers, right? Now, the first misconception people have is, well, they think that means 45%, 47%, 43% unemployment. No, that just means the number of jobs that may be automated. And there are lots of reasons why that won't mean 43% unemployment. There'll be lots of new jobs that are created. I suspect we probably have a few web developers in the audience tonight. Do we have a few web developers in the audience? It's a job that didn't exist 20 years ago that's been made by new technology. And there were jobs like typesetter, setting hot type, that disappeared because that was automated. And web developer is pretty much the digital equivalent that's being created. So there's lots of new jobs. All technologies create new jobs. All technologies also expand the economy. If you look at the world's economy today, the planet's got more people on it. There are more people employed on the planet today than have ever been employed. Employment rates are historically low compared to they've ever been. So we're employing, our economies have expanded, we're employing more and more people. They're doing lots of different jobs than they used to do 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Before the Industrial Revolution, most of us were working out in the fields. Most of that has been automated with machinery today. Only 3% of the workforce now works in farming, as opposed to about half the workforce. So automation has removed those jobs, but there were lots of new jobs created in factories and offices and elsewhere that have taken up those people's employment. Lots of other things have changed. The length of the working week has dramatically reduced. Before the Industrial Revolution, most of us worked 60 hours. Most of us now work 40 hours, in France 30 or something hours. The working week can shrink even further. These are all interesting things. But there are certain jobs that clearly are under risk. In September last year, Uber started trialing autonomous taxis. And it's clear that Uber is only going to scale like other internet companies if they can get the most expensive thing out of the car. The most expensive thing in the car, of course, is the driver. More expensive than the depreciation of the car, more expensive than the fuel. That's the thing that makes a taxi journey so expensive. Uber can only justify their billion-dollar valuation if they can scale like other internet businesses, if they can be autonomous. And they're clearly on set to do that, right? And so the irony there is every taxi driver should have woken up in September and realized that their job was at threat. And this is the funny thing. The newest job on the planet, being Uber driver, is probably the shortest lived job on the planet. And of course, if we were trying to create a time in history to do this, this is about the worst possible time I think could do it, because there's so many unhelpful things going on at the same time which are pushing us in the same wrong direction, right? There's the ongoing global financial crisis. Well, the never-ending global financial crisis, because as far as I can see, once you start printing money, you can't ever stop printing money. So we're never going to get out of the global financial crisis. This is the new form of economics that we're going to have to live with. But it means, the economies that we live in are, so precariously placed. Global climate change, another problem that's going to stress the planet immensely. So I apologize, as someone who represents perhaps the older generation in this room, to the mess that we're leaving the planet in, right? But it's not a helpful change if we're trying to also deal with technological progress and technological unemployment at the same time. The increasing global population, the fact that we're all getting older, that's fantastic. We all live longer. But that creates even more problems about the employment market. How are we going to be able to afford pensions? How are we going to be able to look after all the elderly people? It's interesting, actually, it's the same picture for all of these global problems. We only get global problems. The global refugee problem, our world is immensely stressed by all these things. And technology is only going to be another pressure point in this same direction. And there's some very worrying trends. You can pick your favorite economists. This is one of my more favorite graphs. This is a graph. The orange curve is increasing productivity. It's the United States, but you get a similar thing for Australia, other developed countries. And you see since the Second World War, you see over the last 60 or 70 years, you see that wonderful increase in productivity. Most of that driven by technology. Most of that driven by fat computing. Right? And that's improved our lives. That's why we live better lives than our parents lived better lives than our grandparents. So that's the story that economists would like you to believe. Increasing productivity has brought us growth. And then the brown line is employment. And employment has grown as markets, as our GDPs have grown. Employment has grown despite the fact that machines have got more productive and so on. But nevertheless, that's tracked productivity until the dot-com crash, till about the year 2000. And then there's this worrying disconnect here, where you see employment is no longer rising, but productivity is, as we automate more and more with fewer and fewer people. And there's lots of other worrying trends. Here's another nice pie chart that shows something else that people are starting to get very worried about, which is that we used to think that the jobs that were going to be automated were going to be the jobs in the factories. Well, that's true. You go into a car factory today, and sure enough, the robots are doing the painting, the robots are doing the welding, they're doing it far better, far cheaper, far more effectively than humans ever did. But the worrying trend is this, what's called the hollowing out of the middle. You see that it used to be, in 1983, 59% of us were in middle-skill occupations. The sorts of things like journalist, accountant, things that you used to go to university to do. And that's decreased now. In 2012, it's down to 45%, a worrying decrease, squeezing of the middle there. And the low-skill populations have increased from 15% to 18%, more of us unfortunately being baristas and working in fast food joints. So we should be thinking about that question. I think we'll probably come back to the panel. And the last thing I want to talk about is, should we be fearing artificial intelligence and robotics in warfare? Something that's happening again. There's an arms race happening. Again, I like to point out to people it's not AI, it's autonomy. That's the thing to be worrying about. A year and a half ago, I got helped put together an open letter that was signed by thousands of my colleagues calling upon the United Nations to try and preemptively ban the development of autonomous weapons and the fielding of autonomous weapons in the battlefield. Since that time, I've got a bunch of pictures now of some of the technologies that are being piloted by arms companies around the world. And it's in every sphere. In the air, you see this is British Aerospace's Tyrannis autonomous drone. It can fly transcontinental, fly completely autonomously. That is the future of air warfare. It looks a terrifying beast. Earlier this year, the United States Navy launched their first fully autonomous ship, the Sea Hunter. when they launched it, they said, oh, this is just going to be used to minesweep. A few weeks ago, they announced their intention to put weapons on it to actually turn this into a fully autonomous naval ship. This is a Russian autonomous tank, the MRK-25. Russia has an order book for autonomous tanks that goes into the hundreds of millions. And this is the Boeing Voyager autonomous submarine. It's the size of a bus. It can travel across the Pacific completely autonomously without any input at all. And for that reason, you can see that our warning, I think, was actually right on the nail, that there's an arms race happening, and these technologies will be fielded, and they will be incredibly destabilizing. It will you think the world is destabilized today, which it is. I mean, it's terrifying what's happening in Korea today and in Syria, in Afghanistan. You think, we throw into the mix autonomous weapons, which is currently rather stupid. That's only going to make life even more terrible and more terrifying. So, I'm just going to finish. There's much to worry about. I don't want you, though, to think that this is all worry and doom and gloom, because there's a very good reason. I've mentioned some of the things. There's a summary of all the things I've talked about today. But you should remember all the benefits, because at the end of the day, it could all make us healthier, wealthier, and happier. The robots could take the sweat. But we are in a critical choice moment in history where we get to choose. That's not me, that's we as a society get to choose which path we go down. Do we actually share the wealth that those robots produce? Or do we allow inequality in our society to increase even further? And we're already seeing the seeds of dissatisfaction in places like the election of Trump and Brexit in the UK. We're seeing the seeds of dissatisfaction of people who are realizing that they're not benefiting like the rich are. But we get to make these choices. And in fact, it's about the only hand of cards we've got to play. The last 50 years of growth came about by technology, most of it by information technology. We have so many problems challenging us today, and about the only thing I think that can get us out of it is if we play the right hand of cards with technology today, and AI is going to be a big part of that future. We just have to make sure that we go down the right path. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Toby. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over now. We're going to do about a 45-minute panel followed by a quick Q&A. So if I can please have my other panelists come up to the stage. They will introduce themselves, as well as our MC, Meow Meow. If you can give them a round of applause.
Who's terrified? Thank you very much for that, by the way. So we're going to do a panel discussion, and then we'll be followed by questions from the audience. Just a quick introduction. I'm Meow Ludo, Meow. I set up Australia's first open access molecular biology lab. There we go, thank you. Basically we hack biology. I'm also an implantee, so I'm cyborg. I'm not going to rise up yet and overthrow anyone. I'll just pass it along, and I'll get each of the panelists to give a quick introduction. You already have one. There you go.
Nothing more to say.
There you go. Thank you. So I'm Mary-Ann Williams, and I'm Director of Disruptive Innovation at UTS, and I also run the Magic Lab, which is Australia's leading research group in social robotics. Sure. So a social robot is a robot that has social skills. So it's a very sophisticated kind of artificial intelligence that can not only solve problems like world peace, but it can express emotions, and it has self-awareness. Okay, and on top of that, it has social skills. So it can persuade you to do things that maybe you wouldn't do all by yourself.
Now you should be worried.
My name is William Judge. I'm the head of social robotics as well at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. So I work in an area called the Innovation Lab, which is effectively our research and R&D area. We have projects looking at emerging technologies and the impact of those technologies on financial services at the bank, but also all of our clients, which range across industries from healthcare to education to retail, et cetera, et cetera. I lead up the project looking at, as I said, social robotics and the impact of that particular technology on the bank and our clients.
So we might just start. AI is a really big field. If we could just get a definition from each of the panelists about what they think AI is and what it encompasses.
So I'm going to say it's trying to get machines to do things that we think of as intelligent.
Let me just process that.
Marianne wants to disagree with me whenever I say this.
I will disagree with you. I'm not trying to. Okay, so artificial intelligence is obviously something that we've built that is goal-directed. So it embodies behaviors that are self-directed, and these behaviors take it toward that goal. There's a huge spectrum, from sort of insect level intelligence to human level, and then alien level, and then etc. Yeah.
So I guess the only thing I can really add to that is that it's about creating intelligent agents. So entities that take in data from the world around them, do something with that data, or apply some sort of logic or intelligence to it in order to attempt to do something that it wants to do, so achieve some sort of outcome in which it achieves some reward for. And there's lots of different ways to create artificial intelligence. One of the most popular at the moment, machine learning, so giving algorithms a whole bunch of data so that they can learn over time how to better perform a particular task.
I just wanted to add, when people ask you about artificial intelligence, most people focus on the intelligence. And in fact, my answer responded exactly to the intelligence. But actually, although many people think AI is a bad name, and we'd be better off with another name in Germany, they call it informatic and other things. But there's actually something really important about the artificial, which is that it's a different type of intelligence, or it may well be a very different type of intelligence. We don't build machines yet that have any sentience, any consciousness, and they may well be intelligent but unconscious. They may be, in some sense, zombie intelligence, if you like to think of it that way. That they may be a different type of intelligence. There you go, giving you something to fight on.
No, so I think that you do need to have a very expansive view of intelligence, because it's not just the human mind. What about society? What about crowd truth? So I think intelligence is much more than a machine learning system, a robot, or even a single person.
There we go. Why don't you guys grab that one? Yeah. So we're talking about different types of intelligence. So I know that I have a question here about general intelligence. So within the field of AI, we use this as an umbrella term. Are there specific types that we should be concerned about? Are there other types which shouldn't be? And you said you're doing social robotics. Is that more like an artificial general intelligence? And maybe just cover what the differences are.
Right. So AI tends to be interpreted to be sort of a narrow kind of intelligence, a specific, driving a car, or, some specific task-related system. Artificial general intelligence is more human-level intelligence, where you sort of have a cognitive system that is thinking, that is autonomous, and that is very sophisticated. You think of Watson. I mean, that's probably as close as we have today. And actually, the founder, the person who actually came up with the term artificial intelligence, was pursuing human-level intelligence. And so really, back in the 1950s, they were the same thing. But then we developed algorithms that could take data and do amazing things with it in very narrow domains. And so that sort of was a spin-off, and it's had a lot of success. But there's still a very strong community of researchers pursuing this bigger goal of artificial general intelligence, which includes things like common sense reasoning.
Do you want to add anything?
Yeah. So let's not forget his name, John McCarthy. who was a regular visitor to Marianne's lab. At the moment today, most of what we build is best described as idiot savants. They're very good at a very narrow task, and as soon as you take them outside that task, anything that requires any common sense reasoning, anything that requires any adaptability, they break. We don't know how to build those machines, and we would love to build those machines, and that's what the bigger goal of artificial general intelligence would be.
Would you guys agree with that statement?
Well, I think Toby doesn't know how to build that, but we know how to build it. Yeah, and but part of the problem is just not having machines that are fast enough. So I think that we know a lot more. It's just like in the early days of computing. I mean, computing was invented well before there were actual computers, and so I think what we're learning in neuroscience, what we're able to sort of run in simulation in sort of certain areas, and who knows what quantum computing may do for us. It's fairly magical. So I think that, I think the other thing to really appreciate is that everyone here is intelligent, right? And you're all proof of concept. I mean, there's no reason why, we can't build a truly artificially general intelligent creature. You had something?
No, there's no reason why we can't, but our understanding of our own human cognition and the way in which we do things in ways in which we think, and the role of emotion and the complexity of our decisions and intuition and the way that we adapt from one environment to another and context and so on, limits our ability to give machines that sort of general intelligence.
Only if we're trying to build something like that. I mean, it will be entirely different. And it won't be as flawed as people are very flawed. I mean, why would we want to replicate people? Yeah. So,
it doesn't have to be the same route. So a good analogy that is often given is flight. If we had wanted to understand flight like birds, flapping your wings, we'd be still standing at the end of the runway flapping our wings, because we really don't still understand how feathers work and the complex aerodynamics that go into bird flight. And it's still quite miraculous that birds managed to do it with so little energy. But we came up with a different engineering solution which involved a fixed wing and a large, very powerful motor. And that now allows us a much more effective, much more solution than nature actually has ever found, which is we can fly around the world in 24 hours now. But it was a different route to the same. It's based on the same principles. It's the same principles of aerodynamics, the same Napier-Stokes equation at the bottom that govern both of those mechanisms for flight. But just because nature discovered one route, just proves it's technically possible. But we may come up with an easier route, an easier engineering route, which looks quite different. Maybe someone wants to tell us something.
So we're creating these systems that are fundamentally different from each other. Does this make them incompatible? So Elon Musk is building Neuralink at the moment, this brain-computer interface. If we make a system that is so different, so fundamentally different, are they exclusive? Are there any ways that we could upload our brain and communicate with the AI on any meaningful, real level?
I think one of the challenges is that if we build systems that are so different to us, how do their values align with our values? How do we make sure that what their goals are the same as humanity's? If they're so different to ours, and it's so difficult to get this right, especially if they're going to be smarter than us.
I think also part of that is so our understanding of the world is generated through our interaction with it and through the ways in which we sense the world. Through our understanding of a glass of water is the taste of it and what it does to our biology and physiology and so on and so forth. And artificial intelligent agent, whether that's physically manifested in the form of a social robot or it's entirely virtual, the way that it senses and perceives the world and interacts with the world is entirely different, and the type of data that it gets, and therefore its understanding of the world is entirely different. And if you have an understanding of the world which is entirely different, and water means something completely different to that AI than it does to a human, makes it then very difficult for us to have a common understanding of what all of this means, and to sort of then, I guess, collaborate and communicate in a meaningful way.
Fantastic. Just quickly, what do you think are the most exciting intersections with other disciplines or industries?
Clearly with neurology. I mean, whether we can learn things from the more we study the human brain. To go back to this question about where we already have a proof of concept. Every person in this room is proof of concept of intelligence. Technology doesn't always do what you want it to do, does it? The more one studies, though, trying to build intelligence itself, the more respect you have for the human brain, because there's nothing approaches the complexity of the billions of neurons, the trillions of connections in the synapses in the human brain, and that's thinking that we still don't even know how to model a single neuron, and all the complexity that must go into a neuron, and all the chemistry that must go into a single neuron. We have no ability to yet to do that, and then this is the most amazing thing about the human brain. It does it with 20 watts of power, whereas the Watson ran on 20,000 watts of power. So the human brain does it with so little energy. I mean, it's the most amazing thing that we know of. So it is, I'm sure we'll get there to build human level intelligence in machines, but it's not an easy task. That's why it may take us 100 years from now, because it is the most amazing thing that took millions of years of evolution. And then you read about, the octopus's brain, and you realize, it's just so wild and mad.
Yeah, I think yes, the neurobiology, but also psychology, and I think you touched on some of the issues around ethics and law. I think they're very deep, very important questions about what this technology or how this technology will impact business and society. I mean, it's like any disruptive technology. You can only sort of make sense of it after it's kind of had an impact, and you can look back. We can all explain smartphones now, but very few people really saw it beforehand. Yeah,
that's not very helpful because because in the Industrial Revolution there was 50 years of pain before people were able to look back and introduce the welfare state and universal education and all of the things that help people survive.
Right.
So to say people are going to have to wait 50 years and there's going to be 50 years of pain, and that's your pain. And we know it's
Well, this is the very nature. In fact, it's part of the definition of a black swan. It's like, the GFC. Only a few people saw it coming and they bet against it. I'm sure you've all seen the movie The Big Short. And that is exactly the nature of AI. We all know it's going to touch us, but what is it going to actually do? How will it transform society? I'm not saying no one can predict it, but it's very difficult to predict, and we don't really know who's right because there's a lot of predictions out there.
Just back to your original question. So in terms of social robotics, a little bit more sort of a social robotics tilt. The way that I look at social robotics is sort of like at the intersection of these three circles, like a Venn diagram, if you will. So you've got AI, so algorithms that do things like face recognition or speech recognition or object recognition or recognizing affect, so the way that your facial gestures change and what that might mean about the way you're feeling or something like that. So you've got AI. Then you've got sort of hardware design, so the physical design of a robot and what that looks like. And that's very important, one from a sensor perspective, so what sort of data can that AI or those machine learning algorithms gather, but also how is that robot designed? Is it anthropomorphic? Is it zoomorphic? So does it look like a pet? Does it look like a person? And therefore, how do people form bonds with that particular entity? Do they imbue it with characteristics and emotions and feelings and motivations and intentions that it doesn't necessarily have? And then what sort of impact does that have? And then social psychology is the other sort of domain that I think is relevant. So then how do people within social contexts interact with each other? How do they convey intention and form bonds with each other? How do social norms and cultural norms sort of come about and exist? And how does that affect how we interact with each other and gesture and so on and so forth? And so then social robotics is right at the middle of that, looking at how does AI interact with social psychology, interacting with design. So that's, I think, sort of some other domains which sort of it informs and informs it as well.
The short answer is pretty much everything it's going to interact with.
Unreal. So before Toby, you were talking about this recursive improvement. That we shouldn't be worried about this. This isn't an immediate problem or something that's going to come about anytime soon. I was just going to ask the other panelists whether they agree with you on that. The recursive improvement was the AI that can design it. I can't say it. I promise I wouldn't say Ray Kurzweil singularity this talk. Should we be worried about AIs that can improve themselves in a kind of runaway exponential kind of effect?
Of course. I mean, if we unleash technology, you don't really know where it's going to go. I mean, machine learning is all about learning and improving, and but it's not I think it's not so much the algorithms. I think what we're really understanding, it's the data. So it's the data you present these algorithms which tune it and give it all the kinds of behaviors, which is where the bias is coming from. I mean, I did love Toby's example of the courts. It's looking at past cases which are all biased. We know in the US they have a problem. And so it took an AI to make this obvious. I think it's great. This is AI doing good for mankind. And I have forgotten your question.
Are we going to unleash some AI that's going to bring us towards a technological singularity? And why is this important or not important? Why should or shouldn't we be worrying about it?
Right. So that is actually the goal of AI, all right? To build autonomous artificial intelligent agents. So that's what we're actually aiming for. And yes, it will happen. People are proof of concept. Singularity, I'm not really sure what that means, so I know why you would want to avoid that term. But consciousness is really not that mysterious, okay? Because there's no way that you as an entity can make sense of everything going on in your body. I mean, no. Our brains aren't that good. They're amazing, but they're not that good. And we don't need to know what chemical reactions are going on in each and every neuron and cell, right? There's only a certain pieces of information around perceptions and other higher order thinking that we do need to know about. And that's consciousness. And there are really good models of consciousness. Basically, it's a competition for attention. And so I think it's probably closer than people think, because we think we're special. We used to think we were the center of the universe, then the center of the solar system. This is just our very human-centric view of the universe, and it's breaking.
So normally with consciousness we imbue rights. So the more conscious you are as an animal, the more rights you have within our society, and the more respect we have. So does that mean we're going to have rights for these robots?
Sure. Did you want to jump into this one, Will?
And they'll suffer pain, and they'll pay taxes. They'll be legally responsible for their actions. I mean, it's these are really deep, profound questions. I don't think we're any close to actually having good answers to these questions.
Well, no, the answer is clearly yes to every one of those, and the EU has already.
So we can't turn them off.
No.
Oh God, help us.
Well, then because if you reboot, they become something else. While they're turned on, they are, they're the set of their experiences. Yeah. So, Yeah, so they will have rights, just as you will have rights, or have rights. And I think, privacy is a particularly good one, because privacy is a lot more than just data protection. The classic definition of privacy is the right to be left alone. And certainly robots really push this frontier, because they're a physical entity. They can bump you, they can force you to take medication, eat healthily, and they raise a lot of questions around the role of people.
Just on that note, if
one of the great things about robots. So when I talk about about robots in warfare, I say to military people, well, of course, there's fantastic applications for robots in warfare, which is clearing minefields. We can blow up robots without worrying, because they don't have rights, and because that's a perfectly good job for a robot, because no one's life should be risked. And we don't need to put them in the battlefield and kill other people, because they don't know how to do that ethically. They don't have the consciousness to do that responsibly. But they're fantastic objects to have, because we can dispose of them doing all the dangerous things that we don't want to put conscious people who have rights in their place.
So there will be a diversity of robots and diversity of AIs and diversity of different kinds of consciousness, just like there are today. I mean, there are people, there are animals. Some people even argue that plants have some, really respond to music and things. And, pain is a really interesting one, because pain is just totally fake. It is created in your mind. It's a simulation. There are people who actually don't feel pain, and it's a problem, because they put their hands on hot things and they don't react. Someone has to tap them on the shoulder and say, "Get your hand off that," okay? And they sort of die early, and it's a real problem. So we will need to build robots that experience pain for their own self-survival, okay? Also, pain is, if we're going to have a bridge to these machines, then they will need to understand human pain. And
there's a difference between understanding pain and having real pain yourself.
What is real pain? I just told you, it's fake, right? It's fake.
Do you want to see what real pain is?
No,
Let me demonstrate.
It feels real, but it's not. Just like the world around you feels real, but these are your perceptions. And AIs have perceptions as rich as ours are. In fact, they will be richer, because they will have even more senses. We're limited by 6 or 7, depending on how you count. And they could have literally hundreds. And they will have sense beyond our own, all right, including about you and how you're feeling. So, Google has this goal of, knowing what you want to search for before even you know what you want to search for. And that is what AI does. So there will be technologies that know more about you than you do.
So just on that note as well, we were talking about this idea of personhood and the liability of machines to do stuff. We might just talk a bit about legislation and regulation. So you, Toby was speaking a bit before about we kind of have an onus to go and regulate this technology. I'm just wondering where the panelists think that line is and where it isn't. And also maybe whether you're optimistic or pessimistic about where that's going to go.
Well, I think we may have to invent new legal instruments. I mean, we already have this. I mean, there are a number of different actors already that are covered by law. So companies have a legal structure, and they can be, they can be legally liable for actually, homicide even. And so if we're going to have these new actors that are playing significant roles in our society, they may actually have to, have a structure. I'm not a lawyer, so Marianne is more legally inclined than I am.
So, do you have any?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the key issues here is if you have an intelligent agent that is learning over time and changing its behavior over time based on what it's learning, who is responsible for its action. So you're saying that they have rights and that they're, an entity in and of themselves, and therefore I assume you would say that they would be responsible for their own actions if they an autonomous car kill someone or something similar. Then I guess what is the repercussions of that, and in terms of punishment, or what are the legalities around that, or is it the sort of user of the AI, the human that's interacting with the AI at the time, they're the ones who is responsible for if it does something wrong? So if you have a little robot in your home and it injures someone, is it your responsibility as the owner of that robot, or is it the manufacturer, their responsibility? So these are I think, some interesting
So I
questions.
think, you've raised all the really important questions, and what they are potentially are huge inhibitors to adoption, because you may not buy that autonomous vehicle because of sort of the uncertainty around who is responsible when things go wrong. And I think that's the reason why we need to have clarity. But at the same time, we know laws sort of slow innovation down. And one of the reasons, China can be so innovative and explore things and conduct experiments. They could just build a whole city tomorrow where they do all kinds of experiments with AIs that, you couldn't legally do anywhere else. We know that, it would have been hard for Facebook to have been created here simply because of our privacy laws. So I think that just having some sort of base clarity around the legal issues could be very advantageous for Australia. But we know that law lags technology, so it's going to be a long time coming, and it's really up to the people at the forefront and society to digest all of these issues and the questions that Will raised. And law is jurisdiction based. So Australia does have an opportunity to think about these new technologies differently. And we have actually exercised that in privacy, okay? But not in many other areas because we, tend to inherit UK law, and then when they joined the the EU, then, they got tied up in that and we didn't need to follow them, so we could develop our own. But now they've broken free. I'm not sure how that's actually going to be, but I hope that we maintain more independence. And I think, there is no answer, but our job and your job is to keep asking questions and uncover these. And by the way, you all have a lot of AI in your back pocket already. It's very close to a robot, that smartphone. All it needs is arms and legs or wheels. And, it's more like a robot than it is like a phone. So you're actually very well placed to think about these issues. What if your phone could do things all on its own? What would that mean for you? And what would it mean for it if it started buying things, for example, on your credit card? Or if it was out of its own volition sharing information about you, just sharing your photos. Just thought one was pretty funny, so you put it on Facebook. That's the autonomy we're talking about.
I want to disagree with one observation, which is that it's a race to the bottom. That because if we don't do it here, China will do it, someone else will do it. So we have to allow it to happen. I think that's why there is so much dissatisfaction already today amongst people in that we are giving too much free ride, especially to technology companies. When you buy a piece of software, you click this disclaimer, and you give away all these rights that you shouldn't be allowed to give away. It was fine when it was a piece of word processing software. No one's life was at risk. But today it's going to be an autonomous car, which is going to kill people. And that there are responsibilities that go with that. And we have, in the past, developed technologies. If you think of the airline industry, where it's very carefully regulated, and yet it is now the safest form of transport. And that is perhaps a better model than just saying, do whatever you like, which is what the current status quo is. Let Tesla do whatever they like on any road they like, and, it doesn't matter if a few people die in the process.
Just on that note, is there any current legislation against AI or areas of research anywhere in the world that you're all aware about? Are there any limits? So you're saying that kind of these technology companies are free to do whatever they want. Is there any law anywhere to stop them?
Well, there are some laws that require a driver in the car.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And there are some states that have introduced laws that permit driver not to be in the car.
Mm-hmm. Is there any on research itself?
So but it's the whole problem legally has been finessed at the moment because a big company like Volvo has said they'll take responsibility for every accident, and there'll be so few accidents they feel that they can do that. Well, at least now you know who to sue, and at least they're being responsible. But there are many more interesting questions to be had as more and more of this technology gets out there. The interesting thing with autonomous cars is it's going to be a litmus test for how other technologies get adopted. And if we screw up, we could actually, we could give AI a bad name if we're not careful.
It won't matter because these technologies are life-saving. They're doing jobs. They're adding value, and that's what
They're
will
destroying
drive.
jobs.
They're creating jobs. They're making humans better. Yeah. So getting back to your, are there restrictions on research? Well, legally, it's better if people die, because then if they're just maimed, that's a real problem. Now, so restrictions on research. I mean, we all have ethics committees. So university
Speak for
research.
yourself. I run my own lab.
Yeah. Well. Okay. You're
just
a
go-
rogue.
But actually, genetics is one of the most heavily regulated sciences in this country. So I know, like, China can definitely do research. I can't do.
No, but it's also the scale. You know, you can just literally build a city overnight and sort of move in millions of people and live the experiment. And people would willingly do that. In fact, I'd sign up. A lot of people signed up to go to Mars, right? So it's kind of exciting. You want to be part of the learning. You want to shape things. I don't think it's a race to the bottom at all. It's actually a race to the top.
But you put your finger on a good point, which is actually, interestingly, there's been a switch of focus now. A lot of this is happening in companies, tech companies and so on, who are not subject to the same rules and regulations. So, Facebook was experimenting with people's emotions. And there was understandably a hoo-ha when people discovered that their emotions, they were feeling sad because Facebook was manipulating their news feed to make them feel sad. And whether they should be allowed, Facebook, there's almost nothing that stops Facebook doing that, because you gave away, when you clicked, yes, I agree to that, 10 kilobyte long terms of agreement, that were included, they can experiment on your emotions. I don't think they should be allowed to do that. And government is failing us, and we have to stand up and tell government that they're failing us to allow us to sign our rights away like that to companies who are more powerful than countries in many cases.
If the problem here is always the humans, is it better to just train an AI with a really good sense of morality and put it in charge of everything?
There's a book called 1984 that I think tells you where that finishes.
Would you be more comfortable with Trump or an AI with a really good moral code in charge of autonomous military?
Yeah, unfortunately, you're setting the bar so low that
You said it was a race to the bottom.
it's a race to the bottom. Yeah. Well, politics is a race to the bottom at the moment, and we need to reset politics to make it answerable, so that all of us are sharing the prosperity. Because it's clear. I put some graphs up that was highly suggestive, and there's lots of other things you can find in Piketty's Capital in the 21st Century. Pick your favourite economist. There's plenty of evidence that we are not sharing this prosperity that technology is giving us. And that if we find a way for it to be shared, then all of us will be happy. But the dissatisfaction you see in politics today, I think, clearly reflects that we're not sharing that.
Are we going to move on? How are we going for time? One more panel question? Okay, I better make it a good one. Let's have a look. I think I asked most of the good ones.
Let's go to the quick Q&A.
Let's go to the Q&A. I've got... you in the front, Kari.
Thank you.
Did you? I might hand. If I might get Patrick to run this one around the audience.
Okay, I'll take it. Thank you. I'll fetch these later. Two questions. What about the black swan kind of considerations? So, firstly, you're all... I'm very interested in the division of opinion between the two central people of the panel. There seems to be a whole, unspoken sort of whole philosophical angle behind the difference of opinion. The gentleman on my left appears rightly sceptical, if a bit progressive, and you on the right are so enthusiastic. So the question is, the difficulty if you give machines autonomy, why the assumption they're going to have any congruency of interest? I mean, if I was an autonomous creature, I'd react to the slavery of having to sit around and make tea all afternoon or take care of people in an old home. I want to get out of here. And as for the super intelligent AI, I can't see that it would have any congruity of interest with human beings at all. The first place that it would want to be is get away from water of oxygen in a place where there's lots of energy and think long and hard about its next move. So, to the interlocutor on the woman on my right. What about don't you ever have any bad eye nightmares about the downside? That the possibility that your autonomous social helpers will stage a robot revolution, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Anyway, I think I've.
Well, I guess what you're delving into is purpose and motivation, and each one of us we have choices, right? And really, robots are going to be in a similar situation. I mean, even robots today, they make about 50 decisions every second. So it's a matter of what are the choices you can select from. And when you design a robot, you try not to put any bad stuff amongst the options. So, and I think that is really a matter of design and is sort of not that difficult to achieve. Now, when robots start creating their own options, then you can get this kind of bizarre behavior. But and even in human society, we do have psychopaths, and basically most people are driven by self-interest of some kind, right? So you have to set up the kind of the game, whatever the game is, to be in our interests. And at the end of the day, it will be some kind of competition between technology and ourselves. And I think they ultimately will have the edge because they will be bigger and stronger physically, and they will have more perceptions beyond our own. We are very limited sort of cognitive beings, and it's quite easy to sort of do better than us. I mean, we've got machines that can play chess better than us, and there is nothing that that we could do that a machine or a robot or some AI could not do better.
Interesting, a little historical note. The word robot comes from a Czech play about 100 years ago. And in that play, the robots do rise up because they don't want to do any more work. So, I mean, interesting, the root of the word comes exactly from this crisis. But actually, I'm going to actually have to agree with Marianne here, which is, I think actually the solution is we have to set up the game, the economic structure, which currently today is broken. And that we have to make sure that all of us, everyone in society is structured in a way that all of us can profit. We did this 150, 200 years ago with the Industrial Revolution. We introduced a lot of new things into our society. Universal education, so that all of us had the education to be able to do the new jobs that existed. Because previously you just had to be a farmer, you didn't need much education for that. The welfare state, so that if you were put out of work by automation, you had something to fall back on, not just the poorhouse. The pension system, so that we could retire at some point when we'd worn ourselves out and machines could carry on working. We will have to decide a new type of structure, I suspect, for our society. So it's not just the owners of the robots end up with all the wealth, and the rest of us are in this dystopian place where maybe they decide that we need to consume. So we're given plentiful of entertainment that lowers us down. But something so that all of us can prosper, and we just need to set up the right economic structures. It's clear that wealthy corporations are not paying enough tax, that rich people are not paying enough tax, and that there is a distribution problem happening with our society. But we get to set up the rules of our society, and we need to think about, do we need to change those rules?
Yeah, so on changing the economic structure, so I think one of the issues that we struggle with at the moment in terms of both automation and this whole idea of a robot uprising is that we think of this existing within a context of the sort of industrial capitalist model in which we currently live, whereby you're either consuming or you're producing, and if you're not consuming, you're producing, and vice versa. And the amount that you produce gives you an allocation of scarce resources, money, which you can go then and consume with. And if you specialize, then that increases the total amount of production, and therefore you have a job, basically. But if you move outside of that sort of paradigm, and towards so one of the common sort of lines of thought in utopian thought is machines toiling the earth and humans just laying back and being able to do what they want to do without needing to have a job. That's a possibility with totally autonomous and advanced AI. The questions then just become who owns those new means of production? So the autonomous AI, is it privately owned? Is it publicly owned? And then whatever is produced, how is that allocated throughout the society? And then sort of a bit more profoundly, what then is the purpose of humans? If our purpose currently in the current paradigm is to sort of perpetuate our species through getting access to scarce resources so that we can continue on, what then is our purpose if we don't have that sort of qualm of getting access to scarce resources? And then the other part of it, in terms of other robots, if we get to that utopian place, are the robots then just going to uprise and fight back against us? It assumes a consciousness or a self-awareness of the AIs, that they know exactly what they are doing, which is questionable whether we can even create an AI that actually has that self-awareness, which we've already discussed. But, yeah.
This is all really interesting because it actually leads into the question I had. We've tanged around it a lot tonight, but I'm surprised it hasn't come up, which is the idea of a lot of the AI discussion seems to bring up this idea of a universal income. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. And more broadly, I'd also like to get some opinions on, I guess, the risk. We touched on this earlier about the adoption and the regulation around AI. I'd be really surprised. I actually did some AI back in when I was doing my graduate studies. I never would have seen a large crowd like this, so it's really great to see. But I'm also be really surprised if there's anybody who's actually in government here today. Yeah. Oh, we do have one. Maybe we can get a better discussion then. But I'd be curious to get some other ideas, because we've also seen an acceleration of the adoption and of technology, and I'm just kind of curious how we consistently seem to be able to not regulate new technology well, and with the increasing speed of that, I'm just curious to see the risks that you guys see in that.
So I think that we need to understand this technology, and I think if you start imposing regulation too early, then you can sort of cut off potential solutions to big and important problems. And so it is actually very important to play with this technology, not to be building cars that kill people and things like that. But I think that the natural kind of equilibrium is not in that direction. Okay. When we use Facebook, we are doing it in a sort of a trusted environment. Yes, things can go wrong. Yes, some people are doing it deliberately. But, in the main, especially in the beginning with the new technology, everyone is trying to make it work and see what it can do. And, if things do go wrong, that's learning, and we can back away from that. And we can actually quickly introduce law if needed. So I don't really see that as an issue. I do like the idea of people working less. That is a really good idea. Why are we working 35 hours? I mean, I think I could do, in fact, there's research that shows that if people worked more or less half as much as they do, they'd achieve just as much. And so I think there's a lot of scope there for bringing in AIs that make you more productive and allow you to have a better life to spend with your family. I think that would have a lot of positive flow-on effects to society, to the way we bring up children. I mean, our society is broken in a lot of places. It's quite horrendous to read the newspaper sometimes about what people do to other people, even within families, and children are very vulnerable. So I think, there's a lot that we could do if people had just more time. If you could be a better parent because you had, 10 more hours to spend with your kids, and the sort of the game of society sort of pushed you in that direction. You didn't spend those 10 hours down at the pub or gambling or doing that kind of stuff.
So I think Marianne has a far too great a faith in Facebook. I mean, there's an argument to be had that it's already corrupted the political process in the United States. and that we have already need to have stronger regulation on things like fake news. But let's move on. Universal basic income. Yeah, I mean it's one possible solution. There are lots of other things. We don't know whether psychologically it's going to work. At the end of the day, I'm always reminded of that lovely quote from Oscar Wilde. Work is the only truly obscene four-letter word. And even perhaps we can do less work. There's no reason why the working week is 5 days and 2 days of rest. We could decide it's 4 days of work and 3 days of rest. That would free up a lot of jobs. There's no reason why we don't have to work as many hours as we do. These are all decisions that we make as a society as to what we want to value. And as for the existence of jobs, I always point out to people there's almost an infinite number of jobs in looking after, in healthcare, in aged care, and in education. And then there's all the arts. This could be the great renaissance if we wanted it to be, if we as a society wanted to afford it, wanted to value those things. We're all living longer and older. We could absorb every job in just providing decent elder healthcare to people as they get older. So there's no shortage of jobs if we wanted them.
Yeah, but that requires us as a society to decide on what it is that we value. Yeah. What is our purpose? Yeah. So I mean, at the moment, as I repeat myself as I said before, sort of our purpose and what we value at the moment is gaining access to scarce resources, money, so that we can all live and have a certain standard of living. We need to have a conversation around, if that isn't so much of an issue anymore, if everyone has enough, basic food and, all the things to sort of live, what do you do with all the extra time that you do that isn't required to be put towards creating those things? Is it, as you say, the Great Renaissance, and we now have new works of art, or and culture thrives more than it ever has before. But what is it? What is the purpose of humankind as we go forward and have so much more time to do things?
The purpose is to explore space, but also I think it's really important. Somehow this thing that seems to be the core of this is everyone kind of agrees decoupling work and income is an okay thing, and that's kind of at the heart of the UBI argument.
I think the answer to what would we do is we're not going to magically make everything great. So innovation is the real driver of everything. We always want to improve things. Our own lives, other people's lives, whatever it is. So I think there's enormous opportunity for, the entrepreneurial side to be developed. And that is the fun part of life, figuring out how to do something better, smarter, that has, more of an impact. So I think that will continue. And these technologies just allow us to be a lot more imaginative and a lot more ambitious.
Because I'm an academic, I'm going to argue the other side now. So we need to be very careful at decoupling reward from effort, because with all respect, it's easy to criticize capitalism these days. It was much better than communism. It's clearly much more productive, much more creative and innovative than communism ever was. That was Marx's experiment clearly failed, but there's clearly things wrong with capitalism. And that we have to, the free market alone can't be allowed to decide these things. But there's, the capitalist system has generated immense innovation, an immense great increase in productivity and technologies that, probably wouldn't have come about if there weren't those reward structures in place. It's just that maybe it can't be just allowed to run completely free as it has in the past.
When you're talking about AI, though, sorry to just continue it on, you're actually talking about the extreme of this, which is like infinite work for zero reward for the thing that you're programming. How does that fit into that capitalist structure?
I think economists probably should be quaking in their boots because all of their economic models are completely upturned. Yeah. But I'm not an economist.
Another question.
I was wondering which of you are robots and which of you are human. The question's really around what I think it goes to what Will was talking about when, and just a preface to that, when horse-drawn cart was introduced some couple hundred years ago, we didn't foresee then when they had somebody walking in front of the car, sort of waving everybody down to say, listen, please be careful, where we are today with AI vehicles. So clearly, I mean, technology has its own momentum, and that's what we're seeing. And those of you that are in the responsible position to drive the changes for society, because really you guys are at the cutting edge, I suppose. Don't we first and foremost have a beyond anything, a moral imperative to first look at how we can distribute? They talk about the future, it's here, it's just not equally distributed. Isn't our first and primary goal, first and foremost, given that AI and robotics and all that it can potentially usher in, isn't the first priority to ensure that our species is actually okay? Because otherwise it's almost like we have a built-in obsolescence. It sounds like with all the technology and the power, if you like, that will reside with machines, that we in fact we've done our dough. So isn't it then most important first and foremost, and that's to design into the system of AI and robotic development that the species is firstly there's more equilibrium and more, I suppose, egalitarian society before anything.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I guess one of the things that we're looking at in terms of social robotics is not that is a collaboration more than a replacement of humans in certain tasks, right? So within, for example, healthcare. So we're looking at working with various healthcare clients. It's one of the biggest opportunities for an artificially intelligent robot and humans working alongside each other to create a system and create an experience for people that is far superior to what we have today, because it's currently a very resource-constrained industry. You have a demand that exceeds the supply, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're focusing on, as you say, first and foremost, is looking at where are there opportunities for artificially intelligent agents to provide value by working alongside humans, not making humans obsolete or replacing them, but by doing what AI does best, and then sort of allowing humans to do what humans do best, and seeing where are the sort of synergies that exist. So that's, one example.
Oh, well, look, I think, robots certainly in that scenario, they add value to your life. I mean, consider your mobile phone, right? That's kind of a robot. It gives you access to the digital world. Without it, you have no access. And that's kind of a fairly profound opportunity for you, because there are people who don't have access for all kinds of reasons here, even here in Australia. So it's not that you're in an affluent country or anything. So I really see these technologies as helping us in ways that we are sort of unable to operate ourselves, right? As Will said, in partnership with people, where, because a robot in a hospital looking after your elderly mother, you could connect to from here tonight while you're having a drink after this. Also, the nurses can use it to observe her because it's a camera. And, there's sort of a lot of opportunities that we can use these technologies to make our lives a lot better.
So I'm going to disagree with the part of your question where you pointed the finger and said it was our responsibility to build the technology in this way. It's not our responsibility. It's society's responsibility to wake up and take hold of the change that's happening. If you go back to the Industrial Revolution, that was the time that the unions were created that gave the worker the rights and securities that they had. The people building the machine looms didn't care a hoot for the workers, and they would not. Marx would have been right. if it weren't for the fact that unions came together and demanded that workers be allowed to share some of the prosperity that automation of the factory brought. And so we as citizens have to stand up and demand our rights. And this is going to be, I think, as profound as change as the Industrial Revolution, and will require as profound changes, whether it be universal basic income or changes to our taxation system, changes to the very structure of our society. But it's not for technologists to build that into the system. This is us as a society. We have to stand up for what we want. We want to. You don't want to wake up in a society in 10 years' time or 20 years' time that you don't want to be in. So start asking for the society you want to be in.
Yeah, I think our role is really one to promote the debate and to inform the debate, because you would expect the researchers and the experts to know more than the common person. So consider the atom bomb. The people building it knew a lot about it, but until they launched the first one, they weren't really sure if the atmosphere was going to catch on fire. So yes, that is our main role, to bring these out and to challenge people and make you curious to pursue this yourself, and so that society, when it does kind of jump with its feet, then it's sort of in the right direction. And I think with AI technology, one of the things that's different is that it's touching everybody. So it's really up to every single person to explore these things and understand them, and to just keep on asking questions and to follow developments, right? And events like this, I think, are pretty useful.
Just on the note of the similarities to the Industrial Revolution, I saw that when Uber came into some cities, the taxi drivers went on strike, but that just meant more Uber drivers taking that market share. So I think with AI, there's some new nuances to this type of movement that can't. Maybe there's no new jobs. Maybe the AI has permanently taken it, and there's no way for workers to have any kind of effect on the industry.
Yeah, but we all make individual decisions. People chose to use Uber.
Because all taxi drivers are on strike.
You can support strikes or you're not. We made choices. We permitted our governments to allow unregulated taxes into the market. In some cities, they were thrown out because it was realised that there are benefits. It's most technologies are morally neutral. They can be used for good or for bad. And so great. Okay, so there are side effects of all technologies that we may not predict. So it may say, okay, your Uber arrives quicker and is cheaper, but then shortly people are put out of work, and you have to decide what are the consequences. And we all make individual decisions throughout our days that allow these things to happen or not.
Sorry, I was just going to highlight that's the real point. I mean, how you respond to that. And some people will lose jobs, but other kinds of opportunities are created around. Who's going to wash all these autonomous vehicles? So initially there won't be AIs for that. People will do that, and then someone will. This is the ongoing.
Car washes that are automatic. That job's already been automated.
No, but there'll be more cars.
It's only if you want an exclusive hand wash.
No. If you look at the world through the way it is now, and you just sort of now all the cars behave exactly the same, except now they drive themselves, but no, when cars are autonomous, the way we use cars, the ways that cities actually work will change dramatically. So you could start a business where you bicycle to these cars in the streets wherever they're parked during the night, or when they're in sort of car washing mode or whatever. So all I'm saying, I'm just using that as an example to say that these kinds of big changes create enormous opportunity, for new jobs, new businesses. I mean, this is how we got to 2017. There's been changes that we respond to, that we create new business for, and in the spirit of innovation. So that is not going to stop. And in fact, that is going to become even more important. Okay, and this is where I think Australia needs to play a very strong role.
100%. It's going to create wonderful opportunities. It's going to free up our cities. It's going to give mobility for the first time to the elderly, the young, the disabled. So it's going to be, for most people, it's going to be a net positive. But as with all technologies, there's going to be a group of people, it's going to be a big negative. If you're a taxi driver and your only skill that you have is driving, that's disappearing. And it's that inequality which will be amplified, and that we have to work out, well, how do we make sure that those taxi drivers, those truck drivers, those delivery drivers, that's 3 million people, are able to share all of the benefits. And we don't, the current economic situation, those people will just be thrown out on the dole.
Now, Toby works in logic, so he's going to hate this, but you can't have it both ways. I mean, you're telling me that robots only do one thing, they can only do one task, so, they're not adaptable and what have you. No, but now people aren't adaptable, they can only drive cars now. Like, it's just not really making sense.
No, it makes sense because unless you have the time and the money, you can't retrain yourself. You're thrown onto the scrap heap of unemployment, and it takes an education system that prepares you to reskill, to retrain. It takes a society that permits you with the opportunities, and a fiscal structure, a taxation structure, a welfare state that gives you that chance so that you can use your fantastic brain to go off and do new things. But if you just put people out and say, that's it, now you're going to have to scrape by on the basic unemployment benefit, then you're thrown onto the scrap heap of history.
There's so many topics. Like, I don't blame you guys for going on spills because it's just overlapping in all these different sectors. Like with the fourth industrial revolution that people talk about in economics, it's like the merging of digital, biological, and physical systems. And I think Meow, like with the biohacking community, you'd have something to say about this, but I was just thinking about implications of AI and automation on inequality not just between societies with the outsourcing of labor to like developing nations, and how that is not really so much of a we won't see like the next China because of automation of these manufacturing processes, and even they're automating their manufacturing processes, and that has huge implications on labor and who owns capital. But it's in a society regards to inequality, and like when we have these Silicon Valley like billionaires and people who are in these sectors in the perfect place, perfect time to adopt these radical technologies like neural lace with Elon Musk, and merging themselves with artificial intelligence. How can you say like this is going to be democratized and provided to the masses when these people are in a perfect position to kind of use this technology to leverage consumerism and personal information to actually benefit themselves? And I was thinking, like, that's socioeconomic inequality, and then we've got like biological inequality, like Yuval Noah Harari talks about for the first time in history, and that's something I want to hear about, where you have like people say biological castes.
Just on that note, from an AI perspective, like what I do with biology is democratized. So we have a no one turned away due to lack of funds policy at our space. We encourage people. Someone said, if it's not available to the poor, it's not radical nor revolutionary. And I think that AI is a revolutionary idea. I think that anyone with a computer can have access to it. We have great things like YouTube. Information wants to be free. The democratization happens naturally through technologies like the internet, things that can't be stopped. I think it gets interesting when you start talking about Silicon Valley millionaires being able to do this. They built that off the back of open source software. No one individual is going to go out there tomorrow and write from scratch a piece of code that's going to turn into an AI that will do it. But AI has the ability to do things like distribute food across the entire world. We know poverty is caused not by an underproduction of food, but by a distribution network. So I think that there's ways to get there. But the big answer is the way that it gets democratized is by people like us going in, interdisciplinary people going outside of your field, going into a new field and bringing about that stuff with your specialties with you. So in biohacking, the way we democratize it is by bringing non-biologists into our space. I think AI is going to have the same thing. It's when nurses, lawyers, ethicists come in and work with AI researchers that you'll get that true democratization. Does anyone know?
So it's an interesting question, and I think it's a real issue that we have to worry about. That these tend to be winner or take all markets, and it's whilst we can open the software, a lot of the problem is the fact that the data is put in closed walls. Facebook is a closed wall, and we've already seen this. I mean, if you look back at the history of technology, we have had to break up companies that had technological monopolies. So we did this with the telecom companies, right? Marbell was broken up because that was the only way you were going to get competition. And I'm sure in a few years' time, a bright government is going to wake up and start, forcing some of these big tech companies to be broken into parts, because otherwise they become too strong. They become stronger than countries. They have the wealth of countries. They have the data that only they have. That unless they're forced to open it up, they're going to be closed systems, and we won't. As you're right, we won't all be sharing the benefits, and there will be large parts of the world who are trying to industrialize today who now miss out completely on this revolution.
I think I want to hear about the this thing about the changing nature of medicine and how there's this. Or normally we have like a universal level of health, like we can all be healthy, but then like now we have the ability to upgrade ourselves. So medicine is changing from healing the sick to upgrading the healthy, and that's like a completely different type of graph where initially it's like leveling out, where everybody has universal like level of health, developing nations, rising out of poverty and everything, and then people are upgrading themselves, and then there's always going to be a new standard, as some people are saying. And so some people will adopt that new standard, they will be enhanced, have the ability to intimately connect with artificial intelligence, and I feel like inherently that might just be a manifestation, natural manifestation for people to be vastly unequal biologically.
Yeah, look, I think that's a really intriguing idea. And yes, I think it is on the trajectory. I'm not sure we really have much more to offer. You seem to be the expert in the room. But I think, we in terms of an arms race, we do see people wanting to be bigger and stronger than other people and smarter and have access to data. And so it is a kind of a natural next step to be having implants that allow you to, surf the internet all by yourself. And that is in a way, a step towards being a robot. And maybe that will help us actually build a bridge to that technology.
Just a quick final point relating to the access to data and companies like Facebook or Google or Apple and the like. Even from a commercial perspective, where we're trying to develop applications of AI within social robotics, a small sort of field, but for the benefit of our staff, our customers, our clients, and their customers, it's very difficult to develop anything without touching one of those organizations and trying to leverage what they've already developed. So if you're trying to, do basic sort of speech to text or something like that, you basically have to use a cloud service developed by Google or Microsoft or IBM Watson. And it's very difficult to sort of do anything outside of that. So you're sort of reliant on these companies because they have access to such huge data sources that you don't as a sort of relatively smaller commercial organization, and so it does create this sort of centralization of AI and centralization of that sort of capability, which can become a problem.
And you should be always incredibly skeptical of any organizations whose motto used to be "Don't do evil," because clearly they were tempted.
We've got one final question, and then we'll break, and then we're having just some networking. And if anyone has a burning question they want to ask, I'm sure the panelists will be around for a little bit, because there's hands going up everywhere, as the way it always goes at these events.
Hi, my question's just back to talking about jobs. Always there being more jobs being created. I have to vehemently disagree that you think that, for example, talking about a new renaissance, There are bots like Emily Howe that can create music that to a blind test humans can't tell the difference. There are art bots that can take this space away from humans. So like using that as an argument that somehow we'll find new jobs. I mean, an argument was brought up before that CCP Gray made about Luddite horses, that, you know, always that there's always going to be new, better jobs for horses, but their population declined since the early 1900s when machines started coming in. And I want you to maybe think about what is it for the meaning of humanity that if AI can replace or automate a job faster than we can retrain, there is no way that we can, even if a new job is created, we can't physically learn something that quickly to then take that new space up. It's only going to be maybe someone that happens or chances onto it. And I think that thinking of that there's always going to be new jobs is going to be like vastly challenged. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Oh, well, I think that's a reasonable theory, or conjecture. But people aren't horses. And one of the big differences is that we are innovative and that we do have an entrepreneurial spirit and we try to make things better. Every day you wake up, how can you make your day better? How can you have more fun? How can you achieve something more easily? I think this is what people do. And, these new bots, well, robots and a lot of the AI today, they're more like slaves. So, the question is, how can we use those to make our lives better or to make money or to grow something or to add value somewhere? It's not that we're expecting to compete with, you would never want to be competing with an AI because you will lose. So we need to be thinking, how can you exploit this AI so that you can feed your family and whatever. And I think this is what mankind and humankind has been doing from the very beginning, and it is actually what sets us apart from horses.
But that is the same thing. Like trying to exploit and compete are the same thing.
No, because you develop a technology. Okay, and then you sell it. You find a problem that a lot of people want solved, and you develop a technology to solve it, and it does it very inexpensively. All the better. Does it cheaply. Does it for free. Whatever. And then you create the value you use it to create value for people to solve a problem. I mean, this is the driver of entrepreneurship. Ventures and business. I mean, that's what, by the way, I do not like Facebook. I was using Facebook as the example of a technology early on because Facebook wasn't the first social network, okay? And yet that is the one that sort of won the race. And we let it win. We gave it all our data and it won. And I think that is a great lesson to all of us. We've now seen how that works. We now understand how, sort of networks are created and how they, pull people in and trap you and become walled gardens and all of that. I mean, no one understood that even 10 years ago. So this is all part of the important learning. But anyway, getting back to my main answer to you is that people are innovative and only innovation will save us, right? And so we have to be one step ahead of the technologies we create. And as soon as we lack the ideas and the imagination to be one step ahead, then it is a very slippery slope.
These are really interesting questions, and I'm going to disagree with Marianne that machines will, as you point out, be innovative. They will be creative. They will. It's hard to think of something that we could do better than the machines. It's probably nothing that's going to be. But we get to make choices as a society, and sometimes we make choices that machines shouldn't do a particular thing. So we already made that choice in an aeroplane. You could pretty much automate the flying of an airplane, but we like the fact that there's a human up front who's fighting for our life in the event that the screen of death comes up and someone's doing that, maybe they can't help at all. But we like that idea, and so we made that choice as a society. We're going to have pilots on board, and I think we'll probably have pilots on board for a long time, even though they're largely redundant. And then the other thing is that we'll just value things made by the human hand. And if economists are right, those things, we already see this you see the grassroots of this in hipster culture. You know, we value artisan bread because someone made it with their human hand. I won't want to read a novel written by a computer because it doesn't speak to the human experience. I want it written by someone who, another human whose existence is troubled like my own existence, and not by some bit of silicon that's pretending to be like me. And that we'll pay more for those novels written by humans than those novels written by machines.
What if you can't tell the difference?
We'll make these choices as a society. We'll value the human contact. We're social animals, and that's, everything comes back down to those social structures that we started out, those little villages that we started out, those families that we started out in. That's where we're going back to. That's the hope for our society.
What a terrifying thought.
The only thing that I'll add is I think that's particularly relevant when you think of things like education and healthcare and aged care and things like that. Things that and clinical psychology and things like this. So things that are sort of uniquely human experiences, and perhaps we would want. As another human, we would want a human on the other side, or we would want a human to teach our children, or we would want a human to give us clinical psychology advice because they have a brain like we have a brain. They might not be quite as technically proficient as an AI might be, but because of as Toby said, the sort of social elements and the social nature and the fact that we sort of connect on a more sort of emotional, social and empathetic level with a human, perhaps means that we will decide as a society that those are things that humans might do. But also, all of this sort of assumes that we're still living in a paradigm of humans need jobs to survive and to live. There may be another purpose for us that we can come up with as a society other than, I need to be a teacher and teach, and that's what I'm valued as a human being. There might be something else because all the jobs that are already done, we can do something else.
That's a really optimistic way to wrap things up, I think. Sorry if you had a question and I didn't get to you. Could you please put your hands together and thank our panelists? And a big thanks to Academy XI for putting on tonight. This was awesome. Thank you very much.